Hello and welcome to the Can I Be Phished podcast. I'm Scott Wright, the CEO of ClickArmor, and I'm here today with Jeff Tunn, who is, I guess it's a speaker, author, and explorer. We're going to delve into that a little bit, but also 40 years of IT experience and quite a bit of experience as a managed service provider as well. So welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Scott. Glad to be here.
That's great. So I guess maybe one of the things I'll ask you to do, other than my quick little intro, maybe you could give us a minute or two of what you've been doing.
Oh, sure. I launched my own business about a year ago because who would not launch a business in a global pandemic? But the mission vision of the business is changing the face of IT because I think the leadership skills that got us all to leadership positions are not the skills that our businesses need today, nor are demanding for the future. And so most of my work through my writing, through my speaking, and through my exploring is to help elevate the IT professional and turn them into the leader that businesses need.
That's very cool. So I came across Jeff a little while ago as I heard him on another podcast from Stuart Crawford, and thought it was really interesting, and I thought you'd have a lot of good stuff to share with our audience as well. So really happy to have you. And I think I explained a little bit about how we do this show. Essentially, we'll spend a few minutes unboxing a phishing message using my process of gut feel garbage check, sender sanity, link elusiveness, and body believability. So without further ado, I will start my screen share, and we'll have a quick look at that email. Looks like, yeah, it's a scheduled Zoom call. I just got this one today, actually. So this is exciting for me. And I was thinking, what am I going to have on the show for Jeff today? Because I didn't really have anything really too exciting or different, but this one came in. It was really awesome. So this looks like a team call, right? So it's a scheduled call is the subject line. So the gut feel garbage check is something that I do just to say, okay, if I just looked at this very briefly, would it look like something that I would have to spend any time determining if it's fake or not? And one thing that I always mention is I don't load images when I am viewing my emails. So what you'll see is the email without the images. And the reason I don't load them, as most people know, is that when you do that, if it's from an attacker or even a spammer, they will put links into images to be able to tell whether or not that email account is still active or alive. So as soon as you open it, it tells them that the email account's still alive. So it's just a good practice to not preload images when you're viewing an email. If you really want to see them, you can click on a link somewhere that tells you can load them. So right now I'm looking at one that actually doesn't have any images, so I don't even have an option to load them. But the gut feel garbage check kind of looks like a Zoom call invite because it's got all these location phone numbers, and it's got Zoom in it somewhere here. So I'm going to go beyond this step. Normally I might throw it out if it was not looking great. So the next step would be the sender sanity. So I'm going to tell people that sometimes the only way to see the actual email that or the email address of the person sending a message to you is to actually click on the sender name. And a lot of people will say, it's not safe to click on things in a suspicious email. Well, when it comes to the sender information, you actually sometimes have to click on it to see if it's something you expect or not. Anything else in the message, I wouldn't click on. But so if we look at this one, it looks like it's coming actually from me.
Yeah.
And I didn't modify this one at all. So it's been kind of spoofed as a message from me to me. So sright at clickarmor.ca. I'm going to just go down and look at the two, same thing, right? So do you ever see these, Jeff, where you get messages from yourself?
Oh, yeah. It's always amazing what email I send myself.
Yeah. But the first thing I thought when I saw this is going, oh, this is actually pretty tricky. So I forwarded it to my entire team and said, like, watch out for this. Don't click on it.
Yeah.
Because just the way it's set up, it kind of does look tricky. And in fact, the most convincing thing is the link. So the link elusiveness check, you always have to hover over the link to see if the link is going to go where you think
Yeah.
it is. And this is one of the old tricks of, putting what looks like a real URL there,
Hmm.
with a nice long parameter string and all that stuff.
Right.
But when you hover over it, you see it says it's to storage.cloud.google.com / a whole bunch of garbage. So
Yeah.
definitely not going to be a Zoom call.
Right. Right.
So that's probably the biggest clue there right now that I wouldn't click on this. And then the body believability. Well, I mean, this really is kind of the kind of thing you see multi times a day these days, right?
Yeah.
Messages
Yeah.
for a call. So, it could be, but usually for a Zoom call, you'd actually see a lot more content. You'd see more details about the actual meeting and probably a lot more numbers, usually a
Yeah.
lot more toll-free phone numbers. But it looks pretty well created. And then even a link down here for you to find your local number, but there's
Yeah.
no footer or anything. So I think it was a pretty tricky email, but not that hard to figure out that this was actually from somebody or intended to be malicious, right?
Yeah. 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 It's a good example.
Cool. So any final thoughts on this one, Jeff?
Not on that specific one. I'll share a funny story on myself though.
Yeah.
That our the organization that I is one of my clients sends out the phishing emails, and so I got one, and it looked like it came from the IT team,
Yep.
and I clicked on it, so I got busted for clicking on the link. I was in a hurry. And then fast forward like a week, and I get this other email that's saying, "Hey, we noticed you deleted a whole bunch of stuff off your OneDrive, and did you mean to do that?" So I sent it to the guy in IT saying, "Hey, you didn't catch me this time," and he laughed. And he said, "No, that one's real. You
That
really
was
did
real.
delete something."
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, there's so many stories that I get new stories every week. That
Oh yeah,
you go, geez, never thought of that one. But there's no end of them for sure.
yeah, yeah.
So that's great. Well, thanks for helping me unbox that message.
Sure.
After we take a quick break for a commercial message from ClickArmor, we'll get back with Jeff and ask him about his adventures. So stick with us. All right, we're back with Jeff Tunn. So Jeff, I just wanted to note that in your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned that you're a speaker, author, and explorer. So which of those would you like to tackle, and in which order?
Whichever one you want to talk about first.
Well, let's maybe keep people in suspense a little bit. Where have you spoken recently?
Oh gosh, recently was for Ball State University, which is university here in Indiana, where I'm from. Spoke to an alumni group for their master's program about my book that I think we're going to talk about in a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Amplify Your Job Search. Now that was a virtual event because most of the speaking gigs for the last year have been virtual.
Yeah.
The last live event I did was actually a workshop that I taught just about 3 weeks ago in North Carolina to a group of Green Beret that were nearing their retirement date from
Cool.
military service and going into civilian life. And I did a 2-day workshop on Amplify Your Job Search for them as well.
That's great. So yeah, let's go into your book and talk about that. I know it's your second book, right?
Yes, yes.
So do you want to just maybe give people a history of what your first book was about, and then why you're doing the second one?
Absolutely. So the first book came out in 2018. It was called Amplify Your Value, Leading IT with Strategic Vision. And it was really targeted at IT leaders and talking to them about how to create a strategy that aligns with the vision of the company. And then how do you create your vision around that strategy? How do you get your team on board with that strategy and that vision, and then how do you execute on it? And so using a lot of stories, not only from my career but from other CIOs, really led you through that process of creating that strategic plan and then executing on it. I set out in 2020 to write more or less a follow-up to it. My brand is Amplify.
Yeah, sure.
So I was starting on a book that it was tentatively titled Amplify Your Leadership, which wasn't necessarily targeted at the IT professional, but more leadership in general.
Oh yeah.
And I saw what was happening here in the States in late February, early March. We started to see furloughs, we started to see reductions in force, all related to the pandemic and the economic fallout from the pandemic.
Hmm.
And I really felt compelled to put the leadership book on the digital shelf, and I started writing Amplify Your Job Search.
Hmm.
And what that book is a framework and a set of tools to target and find the job that is most meaningful for you. And so it talks about different aspects of how do you identify what those jobs are, how do you locate the companies that have those jobs, and then how do you network and interview for those jobs. And so I literally wrote that book in months, from lots of experience, lots of stories of not only being a candidate myself, but also being a hiring manager on dozens and dozens of occasions, and also mentoring other professionals in their job search. And so I started writing that on March 16th and published it on August 24th.
Wow.
So it really was fast and furious to get it out. Subsequent to that, I have also put forth a journal because a foundational element to the book is I encourage people to journal about their job transition.
Oh yeah.
And so I put a journal out. Disclaimer, there's no new content in the journal. It's literally a journal for you to write in. Don't want any confusion there. But then I also released a workbook that goes as a companion to the main text, that when I talk in the book about doing different things, there are actually exercises in the workbook to do, as well as some additional tools to help you on your job search. And so I've been doing a lot of speaking related to that, a lot of workshops and webinars related to that topic.
Oh, cool. So I wanted to ask, so the Amplify Your Job Search book, is it tailored for IT people or executives or anybody in particular?
I would say it's tailored to the professional.
Okay.
It would work for any industry, I believe. It's not specific to IT. There might be one or two IT stories that are in there just because after 40 years, those are kind of my stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really more at the professional who is engaged in a job transition, either because they are out of work looking for their next job, or they are in a job that isn't fulfilling and they're looking for something new, or perhaps they're just graduating from university and ready to launch their career.
Oh, cool.
All of that would be covered in the book.
Right. And I guess since you started it in March, you were already into the pandemic. So you probably had to do a little bit of content around remote work, remote interviews, that kind of stuff.
Yes, yes. Put a little bit in there about how do you do networking in remote land. You and I are a great example of this, right?
Yeah.
You're in Ottawa, I'm in Indianapolis, and here we are on a Zoom call. We're
Yeah.
expanding our networks as we speak.
Yeah.
And so there's tips in there about how to do that effectively, and how to continue that search when you can't go meet at the local coffee shop
Yeah.
for networking.
That's cool. Any, maybe you might not want to put too many spoilers out, but are there any really, really innovative ideas in your book that you think people would be attracted to?
Well, I think what sets it apart from most is that it does create a framework and a plan. And in this environment, more than any time, you need a plan. This is the worst job market since the US's Great Depression. And so you do need that plan. But I'd say the twist, if you will, on this book is you're not necessarily looking for any job. You are looking for the job.
Hmm.
So it's a laser focused approach. And in fact, it's almost like reverse recruiting, because you're starting with what it is you're looking for in a job. Then you're looking for the companies that may have those jobs. Then you're finding the companies that have those jobs are open. So
Right.
you're doing a little bit of targeted marketing. In fact, we one of the chapters is dedicated to the sales funnel, because when you're in a job search, you're actually in sales, and not only are you in sales, but you're the product. And so it talks about how do you narrow the funnel down to find the jobs at the companies that you want to work for.
That's great. And it must be actually, in a way, a little easier for people to think in terms of working for any company anywhere, right? Just with the
Yeah,
remote capabilities now. So the funnel
absolutely.
gets a lot bigger.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. Well, thanks for telling us about that. Would be interested to hear about your exploration stories.
Well, that's a multifaceted word in my tagline: speaker, author, explorer. And really, what it is I love to explore leadership. I love to explore business. And part of my business now, part of my work is coaching, one-on-one coaching with IT professionals who are looking to grow in their career, either emerging leaders or established leaders. And so many times, a coach will take you on a predetermined journey
Hmm.
from point A to point B. Well, I believe that it's an exploration, and no two journeys are the same. And so if you hire me as a coach, we will explore your journey together. I will serve as guide because I know the wilderness, so
Yeah.
to speak, but we together will determine your destination and what that looks like for you, and we will determine how long the journey is and what things we uncover and discover as we go through that. So that's the explore. It's kind of a nod to two of my favorite heroes, which are Lewis and Clark,
Oh yeah.
the explorers.
Yep.
And there was a great tagline. Actually, it was on a beer T-shirt, and it was the picture of Lewis and Clark, and they were promoting the beer for those who make maps, not follow them. And
That's
that just
right.
really just jumped out at me, and so that's the story behind Explorer.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. Awesome. So, one other thing I wanted to explore with you is maybe a bit of your background with respect to managed service providers. What kind of work you've done with them, or what you? I guess you may have actually been the owner.
Yeah, well, not the owner, but well, I guess in way back when I had an IT company, but I spent about 35 years of my career as a practitioner for various companies, various roles. About 10 years of that as chief information officer for a couple of organizations, and really decided that I wanted the opportunity to move to the other side of the desk. So I joined a cloud company who was a managed service provider of two primary services. Their services included disaster recovery as a service and infrastructure as a service. And our claim to fame, other than the fact that we were in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for 5 years in a row, small little company named Blue Lock, but our claim to fame before that was in the first IaaS Magic Quadrant that Gartner released. RDOT and AWS were side by side. They grew just a little bit more than we did.
Yeah, you
Um,
think?
but anyway, that company ended up being acquired by Intervision Systems, and Intervision Systems is what CRN calls a strategic service provider. So they're part VAR, part managed service provider, part consultant, and part professional services. And so that organization bought the company that I was one of the executives for, and I stayed with that company for a couple of years as one of their executives. They are still one of my clients. In fact, we were talking earlier about the podcast that I host.
Oh yeah.
It's actually for them. It's
Nice.
called Status Go, and it's targeted at the IT professional. And just lots of fascinating guests, fascinating information. So yeah, I spent about 5 years in that MSP space, and I tell you, one of the things that I think really stood out to me and added value to the two organizations that I worked for was being in that CIO chair. I could bring that perspective
Hmm.
to them, and in fact, I just did a breakout session for their sales kickoff a few weeks ago, virtually, of course,
Right.
on how do you talk to the CIO. What's the best way to approach a CIO, and how do you talk to them, and what things are they interested in hearing? And so we could do a whole episode on that, Scott, I'm sure,
Yeah,
for
for
your
sure.
listeners that are MSPs. So,
Yeah, because I remember when I was hearing you speaking with Stuart on the Eulistic show. It's called the MSP show, I think it is.
yes.
Yeah, I think I recall him asking you something about what is special about being a CIO versus just an IT guy that got promoted, right? and and I was expecting that you were going to say one thing, and you came pretty close to what I was expecting, but I think you said it was, it needs to have a more of a business focus
Yes.
than an IT technical focus. I was actually thinking you might go a little deeper and say there should be really more strength in the financial accountability and
Yeah.
planning kind of side of things too. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the relationship with the CFO and the CIO. I think the CIO needs to be able to have that financial acumen, but I also believe it goes deeper than that into the business acumen. And it always sounds funny to say that I think the CIO needs to understand how the business makes money,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's when you dig beneath that, it's a lot more complex than just knowing what product you sell.
Yes.
Right. So, what's the sales approach? What's the value prop to the customer? I think the more you know about the products and services that you provide and the impact that they have on your customer,
Mm-hmm.
the better you are able to serve your organization.
Cool. And I guess something a little self-serving on my part, because I'm very strong in the security side. I have to sort of ask, what are your thoughts in terms of when an organization would need a CISO or a Chief Information Security Officer in addition to a CIO? What sort of pattern do you see there in terms of how they decide that?
Well, I think a lot has to do with the size of the organization. I love having a CISO alongside me. I always love that as a CIO. But at a smaller organization, call it 400, 500 employees,
Hmm.
it's a little hard to justify two headcount to lead that kind of thing. In those cases, I really see the risk department, maybe even under the CFO, taking on some of that responsibility. But when you get larger than that, I think you really need the two perspectives, right,
Hmm. Yeah.
on that. And um, I've worked in organizations where the CISO reported to me, and
Hmm.
I've worked on organizations where the CISO was a peer to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And both are effective. I like the separation of church and state, so to speak,
Yeah.
um, uh, because I need a CISO to hold my department accountable. The
Yeah.
CISO needs my department to hold them accountable, and so I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to
You can,
play.
I think you can get into some conflicts of interest, right? If you have
Yeah,
the responsibilities for security
for
within the
both.
CIO organization
Yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
yeah,
And some of the smaller organizations I've seen that have had CISOs typically might be in a regulated industry where there's a lot of
yes,
high value information or even financial,
yeah, yeah.
smaller financial organizations that might have a CISO too.
Well, and I think for those smaller organizations, what we've started to see in the last several years is the concept of a virtual CIO, virtual CISO as well.
Hmm.
And so having a fractional CISO is a great alternative to a smaller organization. Someone who can make sure that you're taking care of the things that you need to take care of when it comes to security. So I would encourage even the smaller organizations to look for those fractional CISOs.
Awesome. That's great. So, well, that I really appreciate you taking the time and covering all these items. I wanted to ask if there's anything that you wanted to say or that you think would be important for listeners to hear in general.
Well, I think in general, I think with this newfound world of remote work for just about everybody, um, that the security is even more important than it was when you were inside the four walls. I had one CIO describe it to me as, prior to the pandemic, I had 400 locations that I was responsible for. Now I have 14,000.
Yeah.
And it's just a
Wow.
different way to look at it, right? And so the attack vectors have broadened more so to the home network than ever before. So I would encourage your listeners to pay attention to that and make sure that they are the number one priority, or at least the number 2 or 3 priority is security. And of course, I'd love to plug my book. It's available on
Absolutely.
Amazon
Yeah.
worldwide. It's also available in the U.S. From my own website, which is jeffreystun.com. Would love for your listeners who might be in transition or might be thinking about transition to check out Amplify Your Job Search. And for those IT pros, Amplify Your Value might be just what you need in this day and age to differentiate yourself from the pack.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for sharing that insight with us, Jeff. Appreciate having you on, and maybe we'll have have you back for another session sometime.
I would love that, Scott. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's great. And you mentioned your website. Is there any other way you'd like people to reach out to you?
I am all over social media, so I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. It's JTONINDY. So JTON Indy.
Awesome.
Real easy to find.
Very good. Well, again, thanks so much, Jeff, and all the best to you.
All right. Thank you, Scott.